Hey y'all, thank you for being here. We'll go ahead and get started, and a few people might trickle in, but we also, as you can see, are recording this so that other alumni can go back and watch it later if they couldn't be here tonight. My name's Emily Barksdale. I graduated with an MPP in the class of 2021, and I'm now a member of the Batten Alumni Advisory Board, or the BAAB. We just had the nomination process, but if you are interested in learning more about the BAAB, serving on the BAAB, voting is going to happen soon, and we basically run on a school year cycle. So uh, keep an eye out for emails and things. Basically, we are the alumni kind of conduit between the school and the broader alumni base, which is ever growing. We have quarterly meetings. We have task forces. We do some philanthropic events. We do some social events. And so definitely make sure your emails are updated. We also have an Instagram at Batten Alumni if you want to follow us there. And this is the first in a series of webinars that we're going to offer with Batten staff out of interest of the alumni community in just kind of getting an update on where things stand as of 2023. Some of us have been away from Batten for quite a few years, and obviously lots of things have changed, even just since 2020. So I know there's been a lot of interest, and we hope that we can get some of your questions answered today. In the future, we're planning to connect with other areas like careers and academics and finance and things like that. So again, if you have questions or anything, feel free to reach out to me, but also definitely look, email and Instagram is primarily how we will contact you. So with that, I am going to hand things off to Jeff and Anne. Chances are you interacted with at least one, if not both of them, during your time at Batten. And they're going to give us a little presentation, and then we have time for questions. So if you prefer to type them in the chat or unmute at the end and ask, either one is fine. If you want me to ask them, that's also fine. You can just send them to me, and I am happy to read them out. So Jeff, Anna, if I missed anything, let me know. But otherwise, I think we're ready to go. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Emily. And I know I'm mindful that we're speaking to an audience that might want to be watching this on demand as well. But Meg and Michael, it's good to have you on as well. I love interacting with the alums. I mean, for a couple of reasons. One is that, as you all know, one of the big things in our DNA is community, and the idea of people coming in, being in the foxhole together, group work, teamwork, in a challenging program, and then going out into the world, you're sort of bound by this special thing. And I think that's more the case at Batten than in any place I've seen. So it's really nice to watch everybody, go from being prospects to students and now being alums. Especially, I know for Ann and me, we've been here now long enough that we're actually seeing people that we've brought into the school that are now out into the world and doing great things. Present company certainly included. And I think our approach has always been, it's nice to have sessions like this, but I think of this as just one in an ongoing conversation. And so we're always open door, and especially the board. Ann and I together when we were both at the Miller Center at UVA, and for about 11 or 12 of those years, we ran the two boards there. And our approach was always, people are going to give their time because they care about an institution. They're partners. They're not people to just sort of talk at every once in a while. They're people to be communicating with and collaborating with on an ongoing basis. And y'all have always been just absolutely outstanding with that. So yeah, it's good to have this opportunity, but hope that it's just part of an ongoing conversation. I do want to introduce a couple of very special people. So I'm going to actually share my screen, or at least I'm going to attempt to. Is this right? Okay, good. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to introduce our team. And by now, you all should have communicated in some way with myself and with Anne, who is our director of undergraduate admissions. But I'm very happy to introduce our newest member of our team, Estrella Burks-Para. So Estrella, when we found out that Courtney was going on to get her MBA at Edinburgh, which is fantastic, we were sort of joking that it's probably going to take, 3-4 people to replace her. It turns out it actually just takes one Estrella, which is nice. We had a really robust response to our application posting, including people that had actually quite a bit more experience, and she just beat everybody. It was kind of that simple. And some people are good in interviews, and then they get here and you never know. But I'm here to report that she is the real deal. So we are thrilled to have her on board. She is a recent graduate of Washington and Lee, but she is from Southern California, where she is living right now, just for another week or two before she comes out to Charlottesville. She studied politics and theater as a double major, and also got a law, justice, and society minor. She has a really good amount of experience in various aspects of admissions during her time at WNL. And I think it's just given us already, just in these first couple of weeks, some real innovative and fresh thoughts on how we can go about meeting our goal of bringing in the most high quality and diverse student community as possible. Estrella, I don't want to step on your bio too much. Is there anything that you want to say? It's just a hello, or anything about your background that you want to share with the group?
No, that's great. I'm super excited to be joining this community and creating relationships with all of you guys too. I know how important alumni are in the process and keeping the school what it is. So I'm really excited to get to work with you all.
Fantastic. So are we. So let me we're going to go through just a couple of top line things, and then I know we have some questions that are of interest to the alums, and we want to make sure that we're answering as many of those as possible within the time that we have. So just want to reiterate our mission as a team, and that is to admit a high caliber, diverse group of students into a community that's grounded in academic excellence, evidence-based decision making, and the integration of multiple lenses and perspectives, with the ultimate goal of cultivating ethical and enlightened leaders that are catalysts for positive, lasting change. We are it's kind of crazy. We're already beginning our recruiting for class of 2026 in earnest, and yet I was walking someone through a visa issue 5 minutes before I jumped on, and so we are still actually working on class of 2025. So no rest for the weary this time, but we wanted to give you just a quick snapshot of who is going to be future alums in our school. So I'll start with the postgrads. Again, I'm happy to kind of dive deeper on any of this, but just a couple of items that I wanted to point out. So we had 282 applications this cycle, which was continued sort of a long-term upward trend. There was a big jump during COVID. So it's not as high as that. That was actually a 91% year over year jump that one year. We're still back on sort of that trajectory that we've been on over the last 6 years. The admittance rate this year, when I came in, our admit rate was actually like 89%. It was like ridiculously high. We've kept it much, much, much lower. It jumped up again this year based on the fact that we had a larger classroom that we had access to. And so we ended up admitting more than I think we traditionally would. So I don't want you to look at that as some sort of quality issue. It was just a space thing, and we actually had some more space. So we threw out some offers that we thought were pretty low probability. So it kind of messed with the numbers a bit. It's a great class of postgrads coming in. Just to reiterate, postgrads are people who already have a baccalaureate, either from UVA or elsewhere by the time they matriculate, as opposed to the accelerated MPP students. The average GPA for this incoming class is 3.66. 40% of our students that are coming in identify as students of color. 26.3% are first gen, which is by far our highest for the postgrads. And as a first gen myself, I'm thrilled about this. And just know that it's more than numbers. Anne and me and soon to be Estrella are always lobbying to make sure that they're not only coming in, but they're being served in the most appropriate way to succeed and feel maximum sense of belonging during their time in the program. We had a lot of really good programs represented in our applicant pool, and especially in the group that's coming in, the students that are coming in. There's a lot of ways you can slice and dice this, but I just took U.S. News and World Report's top 30. And so students coming in include students from MIT, West Point, Columbia, Brown, Vanderbilt, Berkeley, and Yale. So quite a group of undergraduate programs represented. Pipeline partners. I'm looking at someone that is from a pipeline university. Emily is from Furman, which is one of our about 30 pipeline partners. And those continue to really, really bear a lot of fruit. So as you can see, 20% of our incoming postgrads are from these partner institutions, which is the highest thus far. And it's just provided such a nice base of quality applicants into our program. Average age is just under 25. And then in terms of the national and global reach, we continue to really draw interest from an increasingly large swath of both the US and the world. Now I'm going to bundle everything together because that's I think the easiest number to sort of internalize this, but applicants to our programs across the cycle come from 41 states plus DC and 42 countries, including the US. This has both coasts, northern and southern borders, Alaska, Hawaii. Our global applicants, 42 different countries. This isn't just everybody coming from Canada and India and China. Kazakhstan, El Salvador, Luxembourg, Zimbabwe, Myanmar. It's a really, really, really rich diversity of the class coming in. And expanding the reach of our school is something that we're going to continue to prioritize going forward. Let me pass the baton to Anne for the rest of the programs.
Thanks, Jeff. So as Jeff noted, my name is Anne Carter-Mulligan. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admissions. So the accelerated MPP and the major and the minor all kind of fall under my purview. I think, in fact, everybody but Emily comes from one of my programs, although I only recognize Meg and Quentin. I think I've been at Batten now for 4 years, so I think your time there aligns with mine, but it's really delightful to at least see your names again. So for the accelerated students, this year there was a little bit of a decrease in applications. So we got 33 apps. That number was about 40 last year. That said, as Jeff noted, we admitted quite a few of them because of both expanded capacity, but also really impressive consistency in the academic preparedness of the class. They continue to be really, really strong UVA students. The composition of the class is also really similar to in prior years. So I've provided just a couple snapshots of some of the more interesting lines of data, but we take as the standard of measure the basic composition of the UVA population that our accelerated students are coming from. And the demographics of this class largely reflect that larger population at UVA for the most part. Among this class, we're slightly underrepresented among international students and also Asian American, and Pacific Islander students. But otherwise, 33% students of color. A really interesting outlier this year is that 46% of the class identifies as LGBTQ+. There's also been pretty significant growth over time in students pursuing the accelerated degree on an early timeline. So nearly 1/3 of the class this year came in with a year or more of credit from high school, either dual enrollment or AP credits. So can actually do the program over a 3rd and 4th year, graduate with their undergrad degree early and tack on just one additional 4th year of study. Often those students tend to carry very generous scholarship packages that in part subsidize 4 years of education, like Jefferson scholarships, so they have a lot of incentive to churn right through and get as many degrees as they can in as short as time as possible. You see a sampling of the undergraduate majors of these students here. Many of them are very kind of policy relevant, policy adjacent. Many that you would expect to see, econ, certainly global studies, a lot of the policy related majors that exist at UVA. We can go to the next slide. Thanks, Jeff. So for our BAs, 179 applications is pretty consistent year over year. We get about twice as many applications as we tend to need, or as we tend to be able to admit. We did experience a big bump in enrollment this year. So enrollment for the undergraduate major is dictated by the provost. We increased from 100 students to 120 students this year with their go-ahead. That decision came rather late in the process, in our process, however, so it was after initial offers had already been extended. We were lucky enough that we had a wait list, which we dipped much, much further into than usual. So that shows in that high 80% admittance rate. Usually we hover around the 50 to 60% rate. Separately, we admit some transfer students, so direct transfers from outside institutions to come to UVA for the first time in their third year. So we admitted 6 of those this year. That's also a higher number than usual. In the past, we've had 1 or 2 transfers. This year, we will welcome 6, and we're really excited that we have an opportunity to really work with them as a small cohort and better support them, build some infrastructure to support future growth in transfer pipelines going forward. So much like the accelerated students, the composition of this class roughly mirrors the UVA population that we draw students from. The biggest discrepancy is in international students, as I noted. Primarily female, 2/3 female about. That actually isn't all that out of whack with the students who are admitted into the university. It's usually in the 62%, 63%. And they come in as leaders. So the leadership roles that they've held here, this is just the smallest snapshot of some of the extracurriculars and activities and leadership roles that they held that they currently hold. You'll see they have led blueprint leadership programs. They interned and worked for various congressional campaigns. They're lead advisors for housing and residence life. They hold office in student and class councils. They do everything from volunteering at Madison House to participating in this UVA Survivor Club. So they're a really, really diverse set of students with a really eclectic mix of interests. Very quickly on the minors, these numbers too are a little bit funky as you review them. We actually allow students to apply both to the undergraduate in major and minor concurrently. So a good chunk of our minor applicants actually remove themselves from consideration once they receive an offer to join the undergraduate major. So that 87% admittance rate is a little bit artificially inflated because that comes from a pool that is diminished by students who kind of self-selected out after joining our undergraduate major. I think the most interesting point here is really the diversity of the majors and disciplines that are represented. We have students who add the minor from the kind of traditional degrees that we would expect to see, econ again, government, foreign affairs, but we're really making headway into populations where we haven't really seen a lot of students express an interest in the past. So some of those STEM pathways, neuroscience, cognitive science, computer science, I think that shows the reach and the relevance that the minor holds for students who are even outside of the disciplines of policy, traditional disciplines relating to policy, who might not want to go on to have policy careers, but see some utility in gaining some more knowledge. So next slide. That's it. We wanted to be sure to leave lots of time for questions and answers. We weren't sure which way you wanted to take the conversation. So we thought we'd just open up the floor for wherever you'd like to take it next.
I have some questions, and these are from my brain, but also from questions that I know we've discussed on the BAAB or that we've heard from other alumni and things. So not trying to steal anyone's thunder. Feel free to jump in, anyone who is on this call, if you do think of one. And again, you can also send them to me in a message if you prefer that, or just type them in the chat and definitely can read them. But I think something that is very front of mind for me, I came in 2019 and I graduated in 2021. So I'm really interested to know what you've seen as kind of the biggest change since COVID began in terms of both applications and then also, I guess, follow through from that.
Yeah, I can speak from a recruitment perspective. We have really kind of continued to use the hybrid recruitment tools that we were all forced to use through the pandemic. We have found actually that there is lighter attendance at kind of the traditional information session. We spit content at you, you passively receive, and a lot more appetite for on-demand content. So we have stood up a blog. We archive all of our sessions on a YouTube channel, and we use that archival material in communications campaigns. We shifted to a model where we offer daily virtual appointments in addition to the in-person office hours that we hold. So I think we're able to really kind of utilize the best of those tools. And it allows us to be more intentional about the ways that we conduct outreach and really seek to meet students kind of on their own turf.
Yeah, and my answer is just to clarify, I'm going to be speaking just about the postgrads. And in some cases, my lens is entirely different from the other programs, and in some there's some real overlap. So a lot of the things that Anne just mentioned applied at the postgrad level as well. I mentioned earlier we had apps jump up temporarily, and now they're sort of back on that normal trajectory. I think the biggest thing on the postgrad side has just been there's been a real explosion of non-traditional academic offerings. And I think we're just beginning to see kind of the green shoots of what that's ultimately going to look like. I think that COVID showed a lot of people that you can, in fact, do things not fully in person, which does pose, I think, quite a bit of challenge for us because we're a big public university, which means that we have to go through a lot of barriers in order to get new programs up and running. And so you'll hear me probably come back to this. The reason our initial presentation wasn't as long as we had an inkling about some of these questions. And so we wanted to save time for that, but you'll probably hear more of that later. But that is, I think, a significant challenge is just, how fast the market is moving and how quickly we are able to adapt compared to our peers when it comes to the use of technology. And I think, an additional challenge is just it's kind of built into UVA's brand that we haven't really been like as pro distance learning. And I think in some ways for very good reason. I think we really do think the residential experience is optimal. At the same time, we are going to have to show a little bit more agility, I think. And so that's been a big from when you're competing with other universities like we are at the postgrad level, watching how quickly they've parlayed global disaster into innovative programming has definitely been something that we are keeping a close eye on.
Can I follow up and have you talk more about some of the challenges that you're facing? Maybe they're longstanding or maybe they are more recent, but in terms of, I guess, competing with other universities, but also, I guess, living up to our mission.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like just what are the big challenges, a lot of them are evergreen. Funding is one that is, until we have some massive amount of money coming in to give everybody full funding. Higher education is very, very expensive. And at the graduate level, it's seen less as a public good and more of a private good. But like, I mean, Emily, you've heard me talk about this. Like we have people that come to our school because they really want to go out there and make an impact in the world. And a lot of times that doesn't pay anywhere near what it costs, even if we do give a fellowship. And so we're very, very, very concerned, and you can ask our superiors how much we're always talking about how very concerned we are about this. But it's a real thing. And I think coupled with that, just the fact that it's expensive in general, I feel like we sort of hit a tipping point in the nation in terms of how much debt we're willing to take on. But also other schools, there was a lot of money getting thrown around last cycle that I was just like, it's just really hard to compete. So it's expensive, but it's also hard to compete. And then I mentioned earlier one, just a big challenge in admissions today for our program is just that programmatic evolution that's happening out there. I mean, I see something like London School of Economics offering a 1-year Master of Public Policy. I see, Georgetown offering or starting up a new 10-story building a block from Capitol Hill that's going to be like state of the art, like so plugged in. And it's just a lot, we're not on an island. Like when people are looking at the postgrad, they're typically comparing us to a lot of other things, and we have our own competitive advantages, which I think are very compelling. But it's a very competitive environment, and I think that becomes more acute as new things come online, whether it's faster programs, more flexible, cheaper. These are all trends that we have a hard time keeping up on.
Yeah, I would concur with all of that. Specifically from an undergrad perspective, cost, I think, is a really big determinant of who ultimately decides that they can come to Batten. The accelerated Master of Public Policy students move from a pretty support-rich environment as financial aid is provided by a big umbrella at the university level through Access UVA. And then, in the second year of the program, when they're grad students, Batten as a smaller school simply lacks the resources to be able to fund them at the same level that their undergrad was funded at. And I appreciate Jeff's distinction between a public and a private good, but I have heard it described like suddenly I feel like I'm falling off of a financial aid cliff. And it's a shock. It's a real shock to the system. So we're constantly talking with our development team. We're spinning out proposals to help subsidize student education. But that's a long-term project that will really bear fruit with time, but isn't quite there yet. The other challenge in the admissions landscape is probably something that you all have heard quite a bit about lately, the Supreme Court ruling on the use of race as a criteria in admissions. I think we're still kind of in a wait and see mode where we are awaiting guidance from the university itself and looking to peers to see how they're handling and reframing their admissions criteria in this new environment. So that is a challenge that we're still really actively kind of trying to wrap our heads around how that will affect our ability to recruit the best and the brightest and the most diverse students that we can into our programs.
Thank you. That's a lot to consider. Can you talk about some of the long-term plans? I know we've kind of grounded ourselves in the mission, but in terms of class sizes, goals for the university, and whether that's 5 years or I don't know, some distant future, I'm sure y'all have thought about it, so we'd like to know.
You want me to start on this one?
Sure. Yeah.
So we definitely think that if we're successful 5 years from now, it's because of things that we did now. So we are very much thinking about how are things gonna not look next cycle, but how are they going to look in more of the medium and long term. Again, we can't snap our fingers and get things through faculty senate, Chev, every other thing that has to happen. But we are very much thinking about what is going to be how are we going to make sure that we are succeeding in the best way possible in the long run. You know, one of the things that we are thinking about in the short term is, you know, we have these new 2 graduate certificates, the first 2 graduate certificates ever in our school's history, which is great. It's one small step toward a much bigger diversity of programs that we need to have. But that's going to be, I think, a big change for next cycle. I think we're going to focus a lot more in our home territory and making sure that we're maximizing the people that are coming in from Virginia colleges and universities, because with this extra space, we're finding that, you know, they're high caliber and also high yield groups. So I think we're going to deepen those relationships. And then priority is always going to be more funding. But in terms of like, you know, the issue of like, are we going to increase, decrease, stay the same over the long run? I think for our core programs, we're probably looking at staying like relatively similar. Anne mentioned we had a big jump in the BA allowance, which was fantastic. But I don't see another like big jump in that anytime soon. I think the market will probably bear what we continue to have, or will continue to bear what we have in post grad. You know, and also we want to be mindful of not ruining that community feel. You know, if you start having a program that has, you know, 300 people in it, in a class, that's really hard to build that community. So we want to really try and balance those things. But in terms of new programs, there's a lot of interest out there, and I think we really do have to do our best to maximize how much we are providing in that space, short of a 2-year full-time in residence, fall entry only degree. And if you think of it in terms of like a spectrum, anything from like a short course or a weekend program to graduate certificates to executive to 1 year to, we have to be considering all that, because how we teach and train is very relevant to a lot of people that have no interest or no ability to do a 2-year full-time degree. We need to be serving them as well. So I think that's something that we're thinking a lot about. I think our core programs will probably stay similar in size, but I do think we want to add some more properties to our portfolio.
Yeah, I concur. I think our programs are right-sized right now, so as not to dilute the academic experience. We want to maintain a high faculty to student ratio, so we're at 10-to-1 where we stand. That seems about right. And as Jeff noted, that access to community and the importance of the cohort is really important to us. Also, where would we put them? Like, we have no classrooms, we have no space for any more.
We have no rooms. Any rooms.
No room at the inn. One population we'd like to do a little bit better serving in the near term, probably in the 3 to 5 year range, is really deepening our bench and broadening the transfer pipeline. The provost doesn't have any rules about how many transfer students we can bring in. And it's also a really, really important population as kind of a flagship institution in the state of Virginia to serve broadly Virginia's constituents. And right now, UVA doesn't do a great job at, for example, graduate or admitting and graduating community college students. So in the next year, we're going to work to make better connections to the Virginia community college system. We're going to see if there are any kind of curricular pathways we can work out to try and reduce the burden of access to class. You might not have access to classes at the VCCS that you would be required to take as a prerequisite. So how do we start to figure out some of the building blocks and pieces that we need to put in place to make that experience of transferring to UVA from a VCS school a little bit more seamless? Yes, Meg, I would love for you to be involved in that too. I was so glad to see you're on this call because I would love to tap into your knowledge and expertise there. So consider that an offer that I will take.
Kind of related to that, like note that you just said, I worked in a rural high school the past couple years as a college advisor, and just from my experience with all of the other college advisors, a lot of the students who are pursuing that kind of transfer route, the guaranteed admission route, they are heavily first gen, they are heavily like low income. So not only will it help be more representative in transfer side, but also just in those populations. But kind of when I think about those students, they generally have very little awareness of the breadth of majors available to them. College is seen as very vocational in a lot of cases. So I was just wondering, I remember y'all did the summer program, I think summer before last. I can't remember if y'all did it this year, that kind of exposed students to it a little earlier on. Are there plans like that that y'all have to just increase awareness of public policy as a program, as an option across the state?
Yeah, so I think part of it starts with better information, taking our show on the road, making sure we have good working relationships with the academic advisors at the community college schools that might have students who are interested in policy, and as you say, just don't know that that's one route. I believe that program you referenced was the one run by Jill Rockwell, and I think that was a short, like maybe even a one-time grant funded opportunity. Jeff, do you know any more about that? I think it was a high school leadership development program. I think the more of that we can do, all the better. But you know, we're a team of 2 and soon to be 3, and in terms of the outreach that we're able to perform, we just have to make some kind of strategic choices. And I would love to really deepen the bench with students who are already in college and put kind of on the back burner outreach to high school students who may or may not ultimately decide that the University of Virginia is something that they're interested in at all before 2 years later making a decision to come into one of our programs. But we do have good relationships with our peers in central admissions. And whenever we can, we make sure that they're talking about Batten when they visit high schoolers. And we've done some outreach with Virginia College Advising Corps in the past as well. And so that's a really, really wonderful relationship, I think, that could help start to get the word out more about Batten to high school students considering college.
Awesome. Thank you. Do y'all have like an ideal applicant? Is there, you know, some vision that you have that you compare everybody to, or like check boxes? And if so, what do they look like?
I think of Emily Barksdale when I think of the ideal applicant.
Good answer.
So, no, definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, there's a lot that impresses us. You know, demonstrated leadership. How have you engaged with your community? How did you do an undergrad or any grad work? You know, are you a good writer? What's your vision for the future? For postgrads, what's your relevant work experience? And then there's always these attributes that we think translate well to our program, especially like passion, motivation, integrity, commitment to the common good, because we're mindful that we're not just bringing in a bunch of individual, you know, future leaders. We're building a cohort, and so we really want to make sure that they, you know, are showing us something that we think will add real value. But it's not just sort of that one thing. There's quiet leaders, there's loud leaders, there's leaders who studied economics, there's leaders who studied art history, there's, I mean, people who want to go into consulting, people who want to go into nonprofits. There's, you know, it's this really, really wide array of people that are interested in just being in the arena. For me, on the postgrad side, I will say one thing I very much like to see is someone who really understands what we are about at Batten, what we're trying to do at Batten, and thinks that they would do well in our particular brand of policy and leadership education. Not just someone that we know is just firing off a bunch of applications, but like, they're like, you know what, I get that. Even if they're, you know, they found, you know, a variety of programs that resonate, they said like, this sounds really, really good to me. This appeals to me. That's something that I really appreciate from an applicant.
Yeah, there's no kind of magic GPA or set of extracurriculars we expect to see Nobody that gets kind of thrown out of the pool automatically, or the flip side, anyone who sails right through. We're really trying to get to know students through the application process, and it is intentionally very, very holistic, where it's really the balance of things that you bring to the table that's going to determine an admissions decision. I will say, I think one uniting characteristic among most or all Batten students are they're really deeply motivated by a sense of service, which is one of the things that makes it such an inspiring community to be a part of, is that they are impact driven. They want to make a difference out in the world, but that looks really different depending on whose vantage you're looking at. Dean Solomon, I use this all the time in my admissions presentations. He wants us to admit a class that reflects the diversity of the world we wish to serve. So that means there are so many perspectives and backgrounds and interests and ideologies that really we are trying to kind of complement and balance one off of the other when we're thinking about the class in the whole, as a whole.
That makes sense. Especially for people who may be watching who have been away from Batten for some time. I know something I always enjoy discussing on the BAAB is with members who graduated 10, 15 years ago, almost, what things were like then. And I know y'all haven't been there the whole time, but can you speak a little bit to how things have kind of evolved and changed since Batten's inception?
Yeah. So Jeff, you have a longer tenure than I do since you're at an advanced age compared to me, but in my time, we're like months apart, actually. This is a long running joke. I would say in my time at Batten, I've seen a much greater emphasis on diversity and equity and inclusion. That's both on the application side in kind of providing maximum transparency into our process, removing barriers wherever we can. So giving real precise clarity about what our selection criteria are, considering the contextual information that makes up a student's lived experience. We stopped asking for the GRE, we removed the app fee. Sorry, I have a calendar invite. Also on the class side, I think our classes have grown more diverse as a result of that emphasis. And it is a real strategic imperative for us to admit as broadly diverse a classes as we can. That has only grown, I think, that commitment over time.
Yeah, just a couple additions. While I concur with all that, I've been here a little over 6 years. I've been at UVA for 20, and where Ann and I were for a long time, Miller Center was actually the place where sort of the Batten School, the ideation happened. There was a working group started by the Miller Center, and they were very involved in kind of just the conception of it. And so, I got to see from afar just how that went from an idea to an actual school. I think that, speaking with people like Jill Rockwell, who's been there since the beginning, I do know that there was a real closeness when it just started. And I know some people, might sort of look back with some nostalgia at that. I know when I got there was still some talk about it being like a startup. And I think that we kind of, this is just my own personal opinion, I think that we sort of leaned on that maybe a little bit too much as kind of a security blanket. And I think we had to start realizing no, we have the potential to be a truly world-class program, and we should probably act in that way. And I think since I've been there, not because of me, but I've seen the entire school really just continue to level up in how sophisticated, how good it is. I mean, you look at just the faculty that have come over the last several years. I mean, they are just mind-blowing. I think our what we're doing on the staff side, I think we're just getting a lot better at things that we maybe just we're still learning as we started. So I think the school is just in a better place. I also think that a lot of times schools, especially at the size of ours, which is not a big school, how they are is a lot of times reflection of the leadership. And so, we've had 3 different deans, roughly the same amount of time each, kind of in that sort of 4 to 6 year range so far, because Ian is now about to start his 5th year. And so, without getting too much into comparing 3 deans, I'll just say that I think we're in a very great spot right now, thanks in large part to sort of the leadership and the vision that Ian has. And I think he's just got a great feel for what, having been at the highest levels of government and at the highest levels of the academy, at the highest levels of the consulting world and the nonprofit world. Like, I think he understands truly what we can do to impact those communities. And so, yeah, he's a big reason why I'm still at Batten. And I think he's done a really great job in kind of giving us a new North Star to be thinking about.
That's great. I have one more question kind of on behalf of the BAAB, but if anybody else has been waiting to ask one, now's your time.
If you're going to give me a chance, I'll take it. I think mine will be quick, Michael, so you can go after me. One thing that I appreciated that you mentioned, Jeff, is I know this is admission and recruitment focused, but you said you don't want to just get those numbers up for diversity's sake. You want to make sure that those students feel like Batten is their place when they arrive there. And as someone who is first gen, low income, transfer student, and non-traditional, I often felt like perhaps not that the staff, but I felt like sometimes my cohort, it didn't always, that's funny, that perhaps Batten's inception was not for people like me. And so I'm curious as to like what kinds of things you guys are working through, not only on the admission side, but with the staff that are interacting with those students every day, to make sure that, they're aware that they're dealing with more diverse classes.
Did someone private chat you and you laughed and we weren't in on the joke? I feel like I was picking up on that.
Sorry, I got a text.
So I think I'll answer it to the best of my ability, and I know Ann will as well, but this is something where we're not asking for your help. We need your help, right? Like we need your experiences, which I know you were generous to offer while you were there, but also continue to offer them, because this is part of like how critical a feedback loop can be. I think one of the things that we do from an admissions perspective is, as Ann said, really, really try and bring in a community that is much more diverse across all dimensions. And I think that's really important, because I think that a lot of times we focus too narrowly on diversity issues, and don't realize that, like, you could be really good on 1 or 2 dimensions, but if everybody actually has the same sort of ideology, or if everybody has the same career interests or the same topical interests, or they come from the same 3 or 4 states, you're really still having like massive clusters of people that all have a shared experience, which then means that you have small groups of people that feel marginalized. And so I think that's one of the big things, is really making sure that, and we do that through a lot of different ways. I know for the post-grad side, that's a big push in my pipeline partnerships, is making sure that in the aggregate, they really do try and cover a lot of dimensions. I wish I could say that we had the ability to jump in other people's kitchens and start up programs. A lot of what we do is just really making sure that we're consistently lobbying on behalf of the people that we know are coming in and how. But I also say that, people that are still, relatively new, people like Sean Anderson, like I know his heart, I know his background, I know that he very much cares about this and doing this right. And so I do feel cautiously optimistic. I'll say cautiously because we don't want to kind of like get complacent. But I feel like the team understands that these are issues that, you know, we care about, the students care about, and they're going to need to, and Ian cares about. Dean Solomon very much cares about this. So we're going to have to, you know, continue to make big strides in this, but I feel like the commitment is there. But from our perspective, yeah, it's really how do we bring in the most diverse class across the board, and how loudly can we make sure that we're speaking on their behalf so that, you know, because the last thing we want is like, hey, look at this, we had a great group, and then who actually survived to the end of the time, you know, who actually had a good experience at the end of the time at Batten. That's a killer for us. Like that hurts when we know that we're not actually living up to what we aspire and what we claim that we are doing as a community. So, you know, as we hear that each year, it's loud and clear and it's passed on for sure, but you keep passing that on as well. And any thoughts?
Yeah, Meg, exactly to your point. Last year, I stood up a new program in a new admissions program called Bridge to Batten that is specifically designed to build a better pathway into Batten for students who identify as from an underrepresented group. So that's by SES, first gen status, race, ethnicity, however you consider yourself underrepresented. And it sought to do exactly that, help make students aware and help make staff aware that staff needed to serve in roles as champions for these students who might be navigating some structural impediments to joining the Batten community that other students might not. So it had a couple components. One was exactly that, making sure that there were allies amongst all of our internal units that students in this program knew that they had access to and could approach for any number of questions. There was a classroom component. There was a seminar to talk about things that had to do with different ways that your identities intersect and how those in fact have such great policy relevance that in fact they are incredible strengths that you bring and necessary and critical sets of things about you that you bring to the table that we want to reckon with as a community. And then a really critical piece is there's also peer-to-peer mentorship so that you start to build a community of students who are invested, like aligned and invested in one another that hopefully if the program continues to grow will be a bigger and bigger community over time. So it's definitely something that's top of mind for us.
Bridge is awesome, by the way. I have nothing to do with it. So I can't claim any credit, but it is awesome.
Hi, all. I'm Mike Bach. I was part of the class of 2015, which is making me feel more like a dinosaur than I am accustomed to feeling like, but really appreciate.
You just wait, Michael.
Yeah. Really
Wait,
appreciate the chance to sort of like re-engage on what is happening in the world of Batten and appreciate everyone's time and questions. Meg, I think your question really teed up mine more like perfectly. And I'm curious sort of like what else is helpful for alumni to be thinking about to support your work?
I didn't plant him, but that was my final question too.
Yeah, that was, you're good.
Great minds.
Well, since you ask, from a post-grad perspective, one is continue to be truly extraordinary, you know, a truly extraordinary community of partners. I have been relying on alums to engage with prospective and admitted students since day one. As anyone that's worked with them can attest, I never say, here's what you got to tell them, sell them on coming. Like, I don't believe in any of that. I just want to connect them with authentic people, and whatever you want to tell them, as long as it's honest, that's all I care about. But, you know, continue to answer that call, because it is a true game changer. You may or may not know, Michael, but every postgrad that we admit, we put together an individual team. So I look at what their interests are, and I assign them an alum, a faculty member, and a current student, to give 3 authentic lenses in addition to me helping. And so the alums have just been absolutely, killer on that. I think in addition, the Amit alum dinners that we've done have been really, really great. We did them the last few years. We've done them in like DC, New York, and then last year we actually, for the first time, had alums do them without any of us staff being there. So places that we just couldn't justify going to, like let's say San Francisco, we had a couple of alums take out a handful of admitted students. So I think trying to do more of those in the coming year would be great. A new thing that I'd like to we'll get back to you on is something that Estrella already put together just a great document on, and it's just I'm probably gonna just mess up my explanation of this, but it's essentially leveraging people within our community who have institutional relationships to be brand ambassadors for us in terms of how do you get the word out about our programs, potentially even including partnering with a place. So like if we didn't have a partnership with Furman, then the idea would be that I would reach out to Emily and say, hey, are you willing to, be the person who writes a letter to graduating Furman political science students, as in, hey, I went to Furman, this would be great. And in some cases can actually spark a conversation to start a partnership. So I think those are things that you've done. We'll continue to reach out, and then some new ideas on the post-grad side. So, but I really can't thank you all enough for how engaged everybody's been. It's great.
Yeah, similarly, just knowing I have kind of a roster of alumni out working in the field, who are willing to connect with prospective students, to chat about their experience, to chat about professional outcomes, even if it's just an email or a quick Zoom. Knowing more about what good work you're doing in the world is really helpful to us. So I think working with Dana and Steve, admissions can tap into their directory information, or work on setting up that more robust database so that we have a better lens on, like, all right, I got a Department of State contact that I can reach out to because I have a student who's really, really interested in XYZ. The more we can kind of thicken those connections, all the better, because students, they want to know about the student experience, but they also really, really are looking to see what trailblazers have done in front of them and make those connections to you as alumni. So in as much as we can continue to facilitate those connections, it's great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so exciting to hear. And I am grateful to those of you who were able to be here live and ask great questions. We're grateful to Anne and Jeff for giving up a little bit of your Thursday evening. And we're right on time at 8 o'clock. So we know we're all busy out in the world. So time to end. But be on the lookout for the next one, alumni. Again, we'll post about it on Instagram and email you when that date and time is set. So thanks again, and everybody have a great night.
Thank you all. Thanks, Estrella, for jumping in.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.